For the past few months, the NEET INTEL YouTube channel has mostly been monitoring 11175 kHz, which is one of the primary frequencies of the U.S. military's high-frequency global communication system. But there are more frequencies used as part of the HFGCS, and a number of other frequencies that may be of interest to those who want to listen to U.S. military above and beyond what we normally do on this channel. This will be a short video to list off some of these additional frequencies, and when you might hear them, and what you might expect to hear on them. Let's start with the HFGCS itself. You've probably read or heard these four frequencies before: 4724, 8992, 11175, and 15016 kHz. Most of you already know about these, as they are the frequencies you can expect to hear the HFGCS ground stations broadcast EAMs on. For the most part, an EAM broadcast by the ground stations on any of these frequencies will typically be simulcast on all four frequencies at the same time. There are a lot of exceptions to that statement, but we'll put most of them aside for now. You can also expect to hear the Mercury E6's broadcast EAMs on any of these frequencies, a topic of longer videos in the past, and also a topic for shorter videos in the future. The NEET INTEL YouTube live streams mostly focus on listening to 11175 kHz. This is because in addition to the EAMs broadcast by ground stations and the E6s you could pick up on any of the four frequencies, a lot of additional traffic can be heard on 11175 if you're listening from North America. For example, for the recent recordings of B-52 communications on this channel, those planes could only be heard broadcasting on 11175. The fact that a lot of U.S. military aircraft like to use 11175 doesn't mean they don't use the others. For example, if you were to decide to only listen to 15016, you might hear some additional communications that will completely miss on the NEET INTEL live streams. But from experience, most of these exclusive communications are going to be on 11175. Now, these four frequencies are hardly the only frequencies used as part of the HFGCS. Sometimes, you might hear a plane calling in to ask for a phone patch, and you'll hear the HFGCS operator ask them to QSY to a different frequency. These frequencies aren't chosen out of thin air. They tend to use the same frequencies over and over, with a little bit of variation. This list of what we'll call QSY, or phone patch frequencies, is hardly exhaustive. It's not even all the frequencies I've heard while I've been monitoring, but it gives you an idea of when they're used. As far as what you could expect to hear on these if you tuned in on a random day, probably nothing. These frequencies are really only used for phone patches, and you can tune over to them when you hear someone on the HFGCS being directed to use them. Now, here again, there are caveats. On March 17, 2024, NEET INTEL live-streamed 11056 kHz for an extended period of time because it wasn't obvious if a phone patch on the frequency was actually over or not. The stream ended up capturing additional traffic that seemed to suggest that the frequency was acting as a discrete HFGCS frequency for the Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska. If that was the case, it wasn't a regular thing, because we haven't had much luck hearing much else on the frequency since that day. Moving on, most of the time, you hear someone on the HFGCS tell someone to QSY to another frequency, you'll typically hear them say the exact frequency, which will make it easy for you to follow them along to the new frequency. Other times, however, they'll refer to the frequency by some kind of name, either a set of letters or a combination of letters and numbers. We can talk about the Charlie windows first. For example, when you hear someone ask another person to QSY to the Charlie Echo window, Charlie Echo means 9031 kHz. Actually, of the frequencies on screen, the only one we're sure of is the Charlie Echo window being 9031. This project has yet to actually hear anyone use the other Charlie frequencies, or even mention them. The only exception is that we've heard passing mention of the Charlie Lima data window, but we have no idea what frequency that is. As far as what these frequencies are used for, and what you can expect to hear on them, these channels seem to be held in reserve for E6s needing to talk to each other. Some of the most informal communications this project has documented have been heard on these frequencies, and short clips and videos of traffic on these frequencies can be found on both the NEET INTEL X and YouTube channel. Another set of frequencies you might hear folks mention to QSY to, but aren't obvious what those frequencies are, would be the Zulu frequencies. If you try and look for a list of Zulu frequencies online, you might find lists of dozens of frequencies and Zulu designators, but a lot of these lists appear to be out of date. On screen are the Zulu designators and respective frequencies the NEET INTEL project has been able to successfully identify as being in use, with recent dates of use noted for your interest. Note that these aren't necessarily the most recent dates the frequencies were documented as being in use. It's just to give you an idea. Here are some additional Zulu frequencies from a more recent list we found online that doesn't appear to be outdated, but haven't been able to document as actually being in use. From that same source, here's a set of frequencies suspected of being Zulu frequencies, but their respective designators are unknown. Some of you might recognize these frequencies as being part of what used to be known as the Mystic Star Network. Before we move on, something that is generally true of any frequency, but especially true here, just because you hear something on these frequencies doesn't mean it's automatically coming from the HFGCS ground stations, an E6, or someone looking to communicate with them. For example, 13907 kHz, or Zulu 100, is also used by the Coast Guard, and you can hear them use it pretty often. You could expect the same for a lot of these other frequencies. So, for the more adventurous of you who take it upon yourselves to monitor all these additional frequencies, be aware that you're likely to hit a lot of false positives on your way to discovering something the rest of us have missed. The next set of frequencies is a little bit different. The VLF Digital Information and Network, or Verdin for short, is used by the E6s to broadcast EAMs. However, instead of hearing them as voice traffic like you would on the primary HFGCS frequencies, these are only ever digital broadcasts. Kiwi SDRs can decode these signals and give us a text readout of the data they're broadcasting, which is how we're able to confirm what exactly they're broadcasting. You might occasionally see the NEET INTEL live streams stop to capture these transmissions. You can also find clips on the NEET INTEL X account and a number of other YouTube channels, such as on PDGLS and on Null's YouTube channel. It won't surprise you to know most of the time you tune into these frequencies, you won't hear anything. So here's some more information on when these frequencies are used. You should be aware that a lot of SDRs online do not have the right antennas to pick these signals up successfully, which can frustrate efforts to hear them. Another set of US military frequencies you're probably going to have even less success monitoring would be the ultra-high frequencies. The UHF channels are well outside the upper range of almost all SDRs available to you online, which is just as well, because to intercept the UHF broadcasts of an E6, you actually need to be in the immediate geographic vicinity the E6 broadcasting. For those of you with line of sight to a US Air Force base or the flight path of an E6 and your own shortwave radio, try listening to 311 megahertz, as we know the E6 is broadcast on that frequency. For the rest of us, the only stuff we'll get to know about what's broadcast on the UHF frequencies would be from recordings shared by monitors on X, YouTube, and various forums. The end of this video will mention a few sources if you're interested. Before we mention those sources and wrap this video up, the frequencies shared in this video are not comprehensive. There are a ton of other channels the US military uses for communication. Now, having said that, this video gives you almost all of the frequencies that have been documented by this project as being used for the purposes of the HFGCS and for any functionally adjacent communications. If you find there's been an egregious omission, you're welcome to use the comment section of this video to share that information with the audience. Here are some information sources you can look up yourself to find out more, in addition to what's been discussed here. hfunderground.com and radioreference.com are both general shortwave radio interest forums, but have a number of military-specific subforums and threads. There are also some news groups out there. I've mentioned military scans because I happen to be mutuals with them on X, but there are some other news groups out there as well. You might have a tough time finding them because a lot of them are locked behind registration and so tend not to get indexed by search engines. I have a tough time finding them myself because of this. They are out there though. When it comes to YouTube, there's any number of channels covering shortwave radio. PDGLs was mentioned earlier in the video and is mentioned here again. Check their channel out for a lot of recordings of VLF, HF, and UHF communications. PDGLs' recordings and information has been very helpful to this project. Steve St. Dennis's channel is another one to check out. As of late, they've had a lot of recordings of UHF activity relating to drone exercises. If you're active in the NEET INTEL livestream chat box, you probably recognize Null. Null has been posting VLF recordings to a YouTube channel, but I think that channel is still in a soft launch status, so I don't know if it's being actively shared yet. If that changes, I'll update this video description with the link. There's a ton of X accounts I recommend, but specific to the scope of this video, I've only listed 2 here. Pityman often posts recordings of UHF activity, and as mentioned earlier, you probably won't have a chance to hear those otherwise. The Bald Geek covers ACARS. ACARS isn't necessarily something you're going to want to sit around and listen to, but their website, which is a perpetually exciting work in progress, takes the ACARS stuff and turns it into readable text. Hooray!
All right, so this is the end of the video, and I thought what I would do is actually come back on again to thank personally the folks who sponsor the NEET Intel project. So here on YouTube, uh, we've got essentially the up north tier. Up north buys so many memberships for people to the point that I actually can't tell who is buying memberships and who is gifting them. So he's kind of got his own tier. And if you're someone who's actually paid for a membership, YouTube doesn't like tell me who bought one and who was gifted one. So if it's very important to you to get recognition for supporting the project, and believe me, I want to recognize you if that's important to you. Tell folks on patreon.com/neatintel. If you join up at the octopus tier or higher, I will try and remember to mention you at the end of these videos. Speaking of, at the Skymaster tier de facto, we've got Paul. And also active at the Octopus tier right now, we have Espresso and Rick, and they're not currently signed up for any of the higher tiers, but I do want to give thanks to Amanda L and Chris K because they have been supporting the project rather significantly as of late. Thanks also to folks who have supported the project on Buy Me a Coffee, and folks who, if not financially, then support the project with their time over on the Jiang Wanyang Skymaster Surveillance Committee Discord server, and also in the chat box of the live streams.